Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to Caspio's first official live stream. Before I continue, let me make sure that everyone can see and hear me okay. And if you can, just let me know via chat. You can communicate with me through chat. You can also submit comments, feedback, or any questions that you might have. All right, hey, welcome everyone. You can also suggest topics for you would like to see from these live streams. So if you have a particular topic in mind you would like to be able to see Mondays during our live stream, let me know in the chat window. We have a few people moderating the chat, and we will take all of your input along with answer all of your questions in today's live stream. On a personal note, just a little bit about me. My name is Ned. I am Caspio's technical evangelist. Some of you may recognize my voice from a few of the videos that I've done for our YouTube channel, and now you can officially put a face to the name. I got to tell you, I am super excited and feel very privileged to be the one hosting these sessions and also to have the ability to teach you how to use the Caspio platform. A lot of what we're going to be doing in these live streams is picking topics relevant to today's events. So if you recall back from the title, in today's live stream, we're going to be learning how to build a patient disclosure form. I think this is a very popular topic today as companies begin to open up their doors to employees. Once again, it's very important to have a form that allows companies to screen employees for COVID-related symptoms. And then companies can make that decision if they want to allow particular employees to come back to the office based on their symptoms. So that is a very popular and hot topic today, and we're going to be learning how to build a patient disclosure form in today's live stream. The live stream itself, we're calling it Caspio Labs. Where every Monday at 10 o'clock Pacific time, we're going to be learning how to use the Caspio platform through different applications and also interfaces that you can build on the platform itself. Now, because we only get 1 hour for these sessions, obviously we're not going to be able to build entire applications, but we are going to focus on different components that make up an application. Sometimes that can be submission forms, reports, charts, calendars, different components that make up an application as a whole. And hopefully the goal here is for you to learn how to build each one of these components, and then later on in your own time, you can build robust and sophisticated solutions. Now, with that out of the way, again, I'm super excited for today's live stream. We have some exciting content for you today, and I hope that we can grow this community every single Monday. And again, feel free to participate, ask questions, submit comments, and feedback on what you like about the stream and what you don't like. So with that out of the way, let me go ahead and show you what we're going to be building today. Is everyone able to see the COVID-19 patient disclosure form? Let me know. Perfect. All right. Thank you for the confirmation. So here's the form that we're going to learn how to build in today's live stream. Very typical form that you may have seen even with your own organization. If you're going back to the office, you might have had to fill out some of these questions. You can make the form completely anonymous if you want to, or you can expose the first and last name. That's really up to your preference and the organization itself. But you can fill out your first and last name, and then we have a few fields that the employees can fill out. This form is conditional, so you can actually show and hide fields based on prior input. And we are going to be learning how to do that in today's live stream as well. So let me go into my account and let's take a look and see how we can actually build a form like this in Caspio very quickly. So once you're inside your Caspio account, if you don't already have an application container created, you can build a new one from scratch. And in Caspio, obviously, there are two ways to begin building applications. You can start by importing data. So if you have some data in a comma delimited file, if you have Excel data or Access database, you can bring your data into Caspio. And if you're not importing any data, you can begin building your application from a blank template. That's what we're going to do today. And then very simple is to give your application a name. Okay? You're going to have your own naming convention. It really just depends on the purpose of that application. But in our example today for the live stream, as I mentioned, we're going to build a patient disclosure form. Okay, so we're going to hit finish, and we should be able to see that container listed. From here, it's actually very simple. You can open up the container and go directly into your tables to set up all of your fields and data types pertaining to each field. In other words, what fields do you want to collect on that submission form? What kind of data would you like to collect? So to build your first table, all you have to do is click on the new table link. And then from there, you're going to input all of the fields that you wish to collect. The very first field that I always recommend for every single table that you create is going to be some kind of a unique ID that's going to uniquely identify each row in the table. For this form itself, let's go ahead and call this field log ID. And for your data type, you have 4 different ID types that you can choose from. I'm going to select random ID. You will see how it's going to become a unique field, which means every time a submission is made into this table, each submission will have its own unique ID inside the database. Now, when it comes to the data that you'll be collecting on the submission form itself, now we can start inputting those fields. And if you recall back from my form just a minute ago, I was collecting first name, last name, and then we're going to list all the other fields as well. When it comes to field names, I recommend that you include meaningful field names, something that resonates. You don't have a lot of space in terms of how long of a field name you can have inside the table itself, but we have the label column here, which I recommend that you utilize as well, because here you can write out the entire label that you'd like to have. So if you have a longer question, you can just copy and paste that question into the label section. And that's going to become your global label across your entire application. What's nice about that is if you're building multiple forms, reports, charts, calendars, that label will always be the same and will propagate throughout the entire application. Now for my very first field, if I go back to my form that's already live, my question here is, do you have a fever, or have you felt hot or feverish recently in the last 14 to 21 days? Now, when it comes to your field name, you can shorten that again because you're limited in terms of space, how many characters you can type for the field name. That's why I said keep the field names meaningful. So here we can just say something like this: do you have a fever? Now, to type out the entire label itself on the form, you can just copy the question. So if you already have these written down in a Word document or Notepad, you can copy them, come back to your table, and just paste it here in the label section. And now this label will carry through the entire application that you have. Underneath that, I want to have some conditional logic built in. So if they do have a fever, I would like to ask a question like this. For example, highest temperature recorded in the last 14 to 21 days. So go back to your table and just input that field. You can call this highest temp recorded. And this field is going to be showing and hiding based on the employee's previous input on the field. For the next question that we have, again, we can go back to our submission form. We can copy the question itself, go back to the table, and you'll be seeing me going back and forth quite a few times so that I can copy all of the questions that we already have. We can call this shortness of breath. Again, the field name itself just needs to be meaningful enough so that you know. Oh, let me close that. So that you know what that field pertains to and what the data will pertain to as you're collecting data in your database. Next question that we might have on the form: do you have a cough? So let's go ahead and copy that. Paste that inside our table. And let's call the question, do you have a cough? Let's go to the next field. By the way, you can include as many conditional fields as you want. In my example, I'm just going to use one, the very first question that we have up here, but you can also go ahead and include those show and hide fields and elements throughout all of your questions if you would like. So it's just going to take me a few minutes to go ahead and copy all of my questions. Do you have a runny nose? So let's do that. And again, if you guys have any questions pertaining to what I'm doing here, just use the chat window. Let me know. We have a lot of people from Caspio here today as well, monitoring and taking a look into your comments and questions. Come back here. Let's go to our next question. Do you have a sore throat? So let's copy that. Back in Caspio, paste that, and we'll just call this sore throat. We're going to include other questions here as well. So let's go back to the table. And let's call this field here flu-like symptoms. Also, one thing to mention here when it comes to data types, depending on what kind of data you're collecting in your table, it doesn't have to be text 255. You can also do other data types as well. For example, text 64,000, which is very helpful if you have a comments field or description or some kind of a message where you want to collect up to 64,000 characters. Now, that's a lot of data that you can collect on your submission forms. Number, integer, and currency are great for numerical data. So if you are building something where you wish to calculate data, if you're building, let's say, a sales CRM, and you want to be able to see pipeline, forecast, or revenue, you can include numerical data types so that later on you can do calculations. We're going to take a look at the date and time in just a few minutes here, but date and time is always helpful to have in the table so that you can know when something was added or when something was updated inside the table itself. Yes and no, always good to have in the table so that you can flag if something is, again, checked or not checked, active or inactive. File allows you to have attachments, so if you wish to collect documents, maybe images or PDF documents or Word documents, I recommend the file data type. List string is always helpful if you wish to have multiple checkboxes inside a single field. Just to give you a quick example of that, let's say you're building an applicant tracking system and you're collecting whether or not this applicant wants to apply for a full-time position, part-time, or intern. You can have multiple checkboxes within that same question or that same field. Password, we're not going to be talking about password today. We can keep this for a different live stream. But in your applications, you can have login screens to allow users to log in and set permissions, what those users can do inside the application itself. So always good to have a password field if you're looking to build password-protected portals and dashboards for your employees to be able to see different functionality and data. And just to quickly go over a few more of these, timestamp will automatically stamp when something was added or when something was updated. Then we have our unique IDs that you can generate. So these will be referred to as the primary keys in most tables because as you're collecting data in the database, you're flagging that entry with either a random ID or auto number or a global unique ID. And finally, we have a formula data type. Also helpful if you're looking to compute and do calculations on your data. So let's say, for example, you're building an e-commerce application and you want to submit an order. You could have price times quantity to get the total, but you can also do much more complex formulas if you're looking to do a monthly amortization schedule or if you're looking to do a monthly payment on a car loan. So you can inject many different types of formulas and be able to compute different algorithms and things like that. Now, to continue building our form, now that we've gone over each of the data types, let's just go back to our live example and continue copying and pasting each one of the labels that we have. So for the next one, have you experienced a recent loss of taste or smell? Let's copy that question, paste it over here in the table, and we can call this recent loss of taste. Let's continue. So we're going to grab this question here. Do you have a heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease? So these are all, obviously, as you can see, medical related questions because we are trying to screen for COVID-19 related symptoms. So let's call this lung disease, kidney. Again, it doesn't have to be the entire label. Again, this is just meaningful so that you know exactly what that question is all about and what kind of data you're going to be getting inside that field once the form is submitted. Okay, so it needs to be just relevant enough so that you understand, okay, so that question pertains to kidney disease, lung disease, and any other elements that that question has. So let's come back here. Let's continue on. So we're going to have next question. Have you been in contact with anyone who has tested positive for COVID-19? So we'll paste that as our label. Contact with COVID. Okay, let's come back. So we're almost done. We have a few more questions left here. So let's have this one here. Have you been tested for COVID-19 and are awaiting results? Tested for COVID. And we have two more left. Have you traveled anywhere by air, bus, or train within the past 14 days? So we'll copy that question as well. And we're just going to call the field name, have you traveled? All right, and then finally, we, as our last field, last but certainly not least, we have date signed. So let's include that field as well. We're going to call that date signed. And for this data type, we're going to have, as I mentioned before, date and time, so that we can collect the date and time of that particular submission. Once you're done inputting all of your fields, these don't have to be your final fields. You can have other fields that you wish to collect. These are just the ones that we picked for today's live stream. You can save your table and give it a name. Let's just call this live stream TBL COVID symptoms. Click Finish to save the changes, and inside a table, you will see how it's an empty table. There's no data inside it. We now need to build a submission form on top of this table so that we can capture the data from our employees that are returning back to the office. And to build a form in Caspio, you're going to navigate to Data Pages. And in Caspio, data pages are application interfaces that eventually embed into a website, or you can share these data pages using a Caspio URL for anyone to be able to fill out the form, either password protected or public facing form. And then once the form is submitted, we have all of our data stored inside the database in the table. So let's build our very first data page. This is going to launch Caspio's point and click data page wizard. So now here on the left hand side, you're going to be able to see all the different types of data pages that you can create. Everything from forms, reports, calendars, charts, and even HTML data pages. So for example, on the submission form side, again, if you're looking to capture data in Caspio, you can build any kind of form that you want for any particular industry. So if you're building an order form, you can do that. Project form, you can do that as well. You can do survey forms, you can do inventory forms. Again, whatever the need is in Caspio, there's really no limit to what type of a form you can create. And just to show you a live example of a few of the ones that I have saved to my browser, here's an example of a patient registration form. Now, we're not building that today, but this is an example of a type of form that you can build in Caspio. You can have drop-downs, you can have placeholders, you can have calendar pop-ups, you can also have radio buttons, and based on your input, you can show and hide different fields in the form. You can do cascading elements as well, meaning that if you were to input some data inside the field, let's go ahead and you select a particular zip code, you will see how the other two fields automatically populate based on the prior input. You can do real-time calculations on forms as well. So for example, if you input your height and you provide your weight, you can get a total BMI calculated, again in real time. You can do text areas where you can expand and collapse each section. You can do more conditional forms, so if you were to answer a specific question and say no, you will see how nothing happens. However, if you do select yes, you will see how we can show and hide different parts of the form. Here's a list string data type that I just recently talked about. So inside a single field, you can have multiple checkboxes. You can organize your fields in different layout if you'd like, so you can have multiple rows, you can have multiple columns, depending on how you want to lay out the form. I'm going to show you maybe two more examples that you can build in Caspio. So here's an example of a multi-step form. Very popular if you have a very long form and you want to divvy up the form in multiple sections. So this is something that you can accomplish in Caspio as well, where you answer questions and then you can continue to next part of the form. So as you continue filling out the form, you will see the progress bar up here, reach 100%. And then obviously that's when you're done filling out the entire form. Another example that I'd like to show you is an order form. Here's a typical order form that you might see on the web where you can input your billing information. So as you start typing your inputs inside the fields, you can click on the checkbox to copy that data to other fields. More examples of how you can lay out the fields in multiple rows and columns. So if you select, let's say, one option, you will see how auto cascade works. Let's say we select 5 of these and we choose another option here and we select 6 of these. You will see how we calculate in real time, and you can also see the total here in the bottom. If you're looking to add more rows with a little bit of scripting in Caspio, you can accomplish that as well. Caspio does allow you to integrate payment processors. So if you'd like to use Stripe or PayPal, you can definitely do that to monetize and generate revenue via your application. It just depends on the use case that you're creating. So if you're building let's say in e-commerce, and you want that one-time payment for somebody buying an item online, you can do that. You can also do monthly, recurring, or annual if you're building a SaaS type solution and you want to offer a particular service to your end user to use and pay you on a monthly basis, or you can have it be completely freemium model. It's, again, completely up to you and the use case that you're developing. So if you have a need to build submission forms in Caspio, you would select this option here, and then you will go through all of the steps of building that submission form. But for those who are not familiar with the Caspio platform, it's a lot more than just building submission forms. It is really meant to build enterprise-grade applications. So by combining different reports, calendars, charts, you can really build much more immersive dashboards, workflows, and any kind of business procedure that your application calls for. For example, under reports, you can build tabular layouts, gallery layouts, lists, including pivot tables, which are very popular if you're looking to have fields on the left-hand side, fields across the top, and you have all of your data in the middle in aggregate. So just to show you a quick example of a pivot table, let me open up another one of my examples that I have. So let's come down here. Here's an example of a Caspio pivot table. Once you build that pivot table or a submission form or a chart or anything else within the platform, as I mentioned before, you're going to just embed that component of your application into your own website. And you can see here we have sales rep names on the left-hand side, we have months across the top, and we have all of our data in aggregate that's calculating from our Caspio tables. I can also drill down to a specific sales rep. If I wanted to see a breakdown of all of Alejandra's sales, I can do that. I can revert back to the previous screen if I once again want to go back to the pivot table. You can build different calendars in Caspio. So if you're building an event management system, you can do that. If you are building a appointment tracking system, you can build calendars to display events or appointments. It's very nice to be able to see on a monthly view of all of the upcoming appointments or events. Charts are also very popular in Caspio. Charts allow you to see metrics and to visually understand what your data means inside your tables. Just to show you a couple of examples of charts that I have saved, going back to my same demo application that I have, if I go to dashboard, you will be able to see 5 different charts built in Caspio. We have a funnel chart, line chart, bar chart, and what I really like about Caspio charts is that you can show and hide these elements if you click inside the legend to hone in on specific data elements, and you can focus on that specific status or that specific category inside the application. So all of our charts are interactive if you're looking to show and hide elements. And as I mentioned before, Caspio applications really are just a collection of data pages. And when you build out all of these data pages for your application, you can embed them into your own web pages to navigate back and forth between each component and all of the workflows that you might have. So going back to Caspio, let's continue building our submission form. So we're going to select that option and click Next. And on this screen, the first thing that you want to select is your data source. So I'm going to select my table that we just created. Remember, this table contains all of our field names and all of our labels. So we're going to select that as the option. Okay. You can call this data page anything you want. So this is just for an internal reference. Let's call this patient disclosure form. Okay. Styles are all about the aesthetics, the look and feel of your forms. So depending on your selection here, you can see that Caspio gives us a preloaded set of options that we can choose from. Each option here for the style will have its own color palette. So if your website has, let's say, blue colors, you might opt out to go with blue. But you can also fully customize your own style if you'd like, where you can change the color of the labels, color of the fields, color of the buttons. You have full control in terms of the aesthetics and how you want to lay out your form for padding, margin, and how it's presented on your own website. Now in our use case today, I'm just going to choose blue. For localization, localizations are all about the regional settings. Here you can change the date format. You can also change the currency. Let's say if you wanted to go from dollar to pound, you can do that. And you can also change the language on the form if you'd like. So you have a lot of control in terms of regional settings that you can control and how that data is actually displayed on the web. in terms of labels and in terms of buttons or anything else that's controlled within Caspio. So we're going to select English as our localization. Notice here at the bottom that our form is responsive, meaning all of the data pages that you build in Caspio are automatically going to be responsive. So if you embed the form into a website, and you'll see in just a moment what that looks like, and you change the width of the browser, you will see how all of the components in the form will automatically conform to fit the window, to fit the width of the screen. Okay, so if you're on a mobile device or tablet, you will see how everything will automatically adjust so it looks nice and visible on any device that you're currently on. So we're going to leave that as responsive and click Next. Now it's asking me what fields do you wish to use on this web form. So you can select one field at a time if you'd like, but if you'd like to see all of your fields on the web form, you can move them all to the right. You can click Next. And once you reach the Properties section, here you can select your fields on the left-hand side, one field at a time, and you can make modifications on the right side using the form element and how you want to capture the data on that submission form. If you'd like to see what the form looks like at this point, you can always click on the preview button, and here's the form. We haven't modified anything yet. You can see what the form looks like now compared to what the form is supposed to look like when it's completed. So for my questions, I would like to have yes or no type answers, and some of the questions will have conditional form, where you can show and hide different objects of the form based on prior input. So let's learn how we can set up our two fields that we have here side by side. We have first and last name. Okay, so let's go back to our data page wizard. Select the first name field, and all you have to do here is go into the Advanced tab. Say continue next element on the same line, which means the next element is going to be the last name, and it's going to put that on the same line as the first name. Now, if you recall, my labels are on top of my fields, so I'm going to go ahead and say label position on top for both the first name and last name. And now when I hit preview, you will see how both the first name and last name are side by side, with the label being on top of the field. Now, how do I turn this question into a yes or no type answer? So instead of a text field, I want to give a static selection so my end user can either input yes or no. And in Caspio, it's very easy to do that. Go back to the wizard, select the question. In the Standard tab, you're going to select radio buttons. Okay, so when you select radio button options, my personal preference is to have one option per line so that the answers for radio buttons are on top of each other, because if you leave this option here, you're going to have the radio buttons be side by side. I like the radio buttons to be stacked on top of each other, so we're going to select this option here. And for my two options, we're going to have yes, and we are going to have no. Very simple. All right, those are going to be my two radio button options. So now when I hit preview, you will see how we have yes or no. What I'd like to do next is simply place my label on top of my answer. So let's go back to Caspio, and very simple here in the Advanced tab, we're going to say the label position to be on top. Hit preview once again, and you will now see how we have the label on top of our yes or no answer. Now remember this question here, highest temperature recorded. This needs to now show and hide based on the user's input here. So if I select no, don't show that field. But if I select yes, go ahead and show me that field so that I can provide my answer. So let's go back to the data page wizard. And you're going to make use of what we call rules in Caspio. So this tab here is very helpful if you're looking to create conditional forms. All you need to do is click on the plus sign to create your very first rule, and you need to specify the criteria first. So click new here to the right, and we're going to do the condition on the field name itself. So for the field name, let me take a look at my question here. So let me come back here. Do you have a fever? So yeah, this is the question here. So we're going to select that option. Okay, so if it does not equal to yes, so anything other than yes, we're going to go ahead and hide that field. But if it does equal to yes on the radio button option, then we're going to go ahead and show that field. So let me give you an example of that. We're going to hit OK. Now we need to set our action here. So we click new. And we're going to go ahead and hide the highest temperature recorded. Now what that means is if the fever is not equal to yes, go ahead and hide that field. Anything else, if they do put yes, we're going to go ahead and show that field. So let's hit preview. Okay, you can see how we're hiding that field. If you say no, nothing happens. But if you do select yes, There's my field, and now I would like to capture that input from the end user. Okay, one really cool thing here in Caspio is that for this particular field, you don't actually have to show the label. You can actually have the label be as a placeholder inside the field itself. So let me show you how you can do that. So back to the elements. Here's my field. So I don't really need to see the label. I can go into the Advanced tab and say label position, no label. But inside the field, I would like to have my label as a placeholder. So we can say highest temperature recorded. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like once we hit preview again. If you say yes, you will see how we expose that field. And from here, you actually can manipulate this however much you want. If you don't like that particular style and how the label is positioned, you can work around that, and you can definitely have your own input depending on your own preference. Okay, so now what you would do to the rest of the form, you would repeat the steps of including the yes or no options for all of your other fields. Okay, we obviously don't have enough time to show you how to do all of that, but I'm going to get through maybe 2 or 3 more so that you can get it used to the process of how we create these radio buttons. So let's come back here to the data page. And for my next question, we have shortness of breath. Here's my standard tab. Here's my question itself. And I will once again like to include this to be a radio button. Again, I always like to have one option per line. And we're going to say yes. And we're going to say no. And in the Advanced tab, we're going to say label position to be on top. And let's see if we can get the same pattern here. And now you can see how all of our questions are going to be on top of each other. And we have the yes or no stacked. And users can provide their input based on what they're experiencing at the time. So let's do maybe 2 more of these so that you can get used to the workflow and how in Caspio we can, create these types of answers, yes or no. Again, they don't have to be radio buttons. As you see here in the element dropdown, we have other options as well. You can do dropdowns, you can do list boxes, radio buttons, text areas. It really is up to you how you want to capture the data from the end user perspective. So completely up to you and whatever the use case you have and what it calls for. In my example today, we're sticking with radio buttons. So let's choose that option. Once again, we'll have yes and no. And in the Advanced tab, I will say label position on top. Now, if you're like me, I typically like to hit the preview button every time I make a change just so I can see that it looks good. So I'll hit preview once again, and there's my next question. So let's go ahead and do one more. Okay, do you have a runny nose? So we'll come back to the data page wizard. Do you have a runny nose? In the standard tab, we're once again going to select radio button options. One option per line, and once again input yes and no. And in the Advanced tab, we're going to say label position on top. Let's hit preview. And there's my question. Okay, let me know in the chat window if you guys are doing okay so far. If you have any comments, questions, something that you might want to be able to see very quickly on the form side that you haven't learned on your own or haven't been able to pick up, now would be a good time to ask me. If I have the time, I will definitely show you how to do that in Caspio. Just keep in mind, as I mentioned before, you can build any kind of form that you would like in Caspio for any industry and for any type of use case. If it's healthcare, if it's order forms, project forms, survey forms, any kind of form that comes to mind, you can build in Caspio. And I'll wait a few seconds to see if anybody wants to type in their question. And if not, we will go ahead and continue with today's live stream. Once again, thank you guys so much for attending the live stream. We have a lot of people on today's call. I'm very excited for it. And we just have a little bit more content to get through. And we'll be done with today's live stream. The live stream will also be available on our YouTube channel in a few days. So once we've made some edits to the live stream, we're going to post this video and you will be able to see it on our YouTube channel at a later time. All right, so let's do a quick comparison between our live example and what we built so far. So you can see in the live example, we have a heading and we also have some text underneath that heading. Okay, so let's go ahead and input a title of our submission form. So I can just copy this from my live example. Go back to the data page wizard, and here at the top, let's go ahead and include an HTML block. And inside this HTML block, you can use the toolbar to customize your own heading however much you want. It's completely up to you. It's a very easy way to do that. So just to give you a quick example, if you paste the text and you highlight the text, You can make that text bold if you wish. You can change the format maybe to heading 2 so it appears a little bit bigger on the submission form. So you'll have a lot of control in terms of how you modify the heading. Now, for those who have a technical background, if you're a little bit more tech savvy and you have a good understanding of HTML and CSS, you can actually go into the source, and here you can input your own inline CSS. You can reference the CSS from the outside if you'd like. And honestly, it's compatible with any kind of HTML that you can think of. So even if you're doing a simple div style equals and then you're putting a background color, you want to modify your own type of heading, you can do that. Okay, so it's pretty exciting to be able to integrate with industry standard languages like JavaScript, HTML, CSS to further polish up the look and feel of your forms. Okay, let me go ahead and delete that, come back here, and now let's say we wanted to add our text that we have underneath our title. So if I go back to my live example once again, and I copy all of this text that you see here. Let me go ahead and copy that. Come back and just go ahead and paste that underneath. And let me remove some spacing here, like that. Now once you paste the text inside the HTML block and you go to the source button, you will see how Caspio automatically added a p tag for me, which creates a paragraph, and it creates nice spacing between each paragraph in my text. And it did that automatically for me. So now when I hit preview just to see what the form looks like, you will see we have our title and we have the text. Okay, now imagine if you embed this form into your own website and your website only has a limited number of space. This text that you see here will actually wrap. It's not going to go over your boundary or over your border on your website. So it'll be nicely contained within whatever space you have or that container that you have on your website. Okay, so as you change the width of the form, you will see how the text automatically expands and collapses based on the width. And you can also see how the responsiveness works as well. So as you change the width of the browser, you will see how my two fields are side by side. But if you once again shrink the browser, you will see how all of the labels and all of the fields will conform to fit the width of the screen. Okay? So let's go ahead and expand that once again. Let me know if you have any questions, again, so far. If you like what you're seeing, if you'd like to see something else on the submission form side. Once again, every single week we're going to pick something else. So maybe next week we can do some cascading options if you'd like to see that. Or we can do some drop-downs, text areas, if you'd like to see how to further modify the form to have a logo, maybe additional headings. Whatever particular interest you might have on the submission form side, let us know in the chat window. We'll collect your input, and we will definitely try to include that input in the future training sessions that we have for these live streams. Okay, again, I'll wait a few more seconds to see if anybody has questions, input, feedback. Again, thank you guys so much for attending these live streams. We're almost done with our very first live stream. We just have a few more minutes. All right. So let's assume that we have completed all of our fields. Imagine our form looks like this. Okay, and we have all of our questions, and at the very end we have our date signed. You can leave the form as is if you'd like, if you're happy with that. And sometimes when you're building these types of forms, you may actually want to collect a signature from the end user before they hit submit, which is also very typical and common. You would see that on these types of forms. In our live stream today, we don't actually have that included on the form. That is available as an extension from the Caspio extensions gallery that we have. So if you wanted to include a signature on the submission form that looks something like this, and you can start signing the form, it's probably going to look a little bit better if you're using your finger on a mobile device or a tablet. But this actually can also be included on your forms if you'd like to have that. You can also expand upon this application if you'd like by building different reports so that you can output the data and see all of the submissions that are coming in. So here's an example of a tabular report data page that was built in Caspio where you can filter data, you can go to the details of that submission to be able to see the signature and also all of the other inputs that we have. Let's once again go back here to view the report. And if anyone on today's stream has a need for a signature field, if you'd like to incorporate that into your forms, visit our app extensions gallery that you can actually find under product and app extensions. And if you go under UI controls, and before you go to UI controls, we have a lot of other things that you can incorporate in your application as well. anything from dynamic charts to radio button selection. So for example, here you can see bar rating. Today you can have radio buttons, which would be a standard feature, but if you want to dress up that radio button to be more of like a slider or maybe a bar that you can hover over to change the rating, you can definitely dress up your form by customizing it. So if we go down to UI controls, you're going to be able to find a signature form field. You can request more information, so if you'd like to have that added to your form, that's definitely available as an add-on. We also have a electronic signature that you can have in your applications. This is through maybe a DocuSign or a different software that actually sends a PDF document upon signature and upon signing the form. So you can also integrate with different providers out there if you need DocuSign or some other software available. Okay. So let me take a look at some of the comments that I'm getting here in the chat. It would be nice to have a video on CSS and resources on simple CSS. That is actually a really good comment. We might actually include some of that in our next live stream on Monday. So if you do come in next week, we might be able to include a little bit more of that. So I appreciate that comment. I know it's very helpful to be able to dress up the form. So even from the live examples that I showed you earlier on my forms, here if you look at the patient registration form, you can see how just a little bit of styling can really make the form look a little bit nicer and eye-appealing to your end user. Even including this form here that I showed just a moment ago, which was the multi-step form. For those who have wondered, can we put a logo above the form or maybe a heading or some additional text and maybe a progress loading bar? With just a little bit of CSS and HTML knowledge, we can definitely accomplish something like this. And if you guys would like to see a live stream on that, we can definitely do a section on how to include different types of objects on the data page side so that you can have a nice heading, maybe a logo, and you can use that as a template for all future forms as well. So if that is a hot topic, and if anybody wants to see that, let me know in the chat. We will collect that input and definitely include that for the next live stream. Okay? Thanks, Donal. Thanks for coming into our live stream. We're hoping to build this community of everyone week to week, so that we can have more people coming into these streams, interacting, obviously, providing feedback and comments. We're going to try to make it fun. We're going to do some polls in the future for different topics and what you guys would like to see. This actually officially concludes all of the content that we wanted to cover in today's live stream. If you guys want to come back and set a reminder for yourself for future live streams so you're notified and you don't miss the presentations, you can do that on our waiting page. Again, from my personal standpoint, I'm very excited to be the host. I appreciate you guys' time if you do come back. And again, as I mentioned, this video will be available on our YouTube channel as well in a few days so that you can come back and relearn what you learned on today's live stream. So let's take a few minutes to see if there are questions and comments. And if not, you guys are welcome to take off. And then any last minute questions that you might have, now will be a good time. Thank you all so much. Have a good day. Stay safe out there. And hopefully you can apply today's lesson to something else that you're building in your Caspio applications. And thank you to you as well, Northwest Custom Apparel. Don't have the name, so I have to go with what's on the YouTube, so I appreciate that. Thanks, Slavik and Tim. If you have suggestions for future topics, Tim, just go ahead and use the chat here. Input your suggestion. We are collecting all of the input from people. Thank you, Van, as well. So I hope to see you guys, quote unquote, see you guys every single week. We're going to try to make these a lot more fun and interactive in the future sessions. And then, yeah, we're going to have the next topic available either today or tomorrow for following Monday on what we're going to be covering in the live stream. So on a personal note, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it so much for you guys taking the time out of your day to be here. And I truly hope to see you again on the Monday next week. We might actually cover more CSS and HTML since that question came in and that input came in from somebody today. Svetko, thank you so much. All right. Ciao. All right, so I'll stick around and answer questions in the comments. For now, we're going to go ahead and close the live stream. The chat will still remain open for a few more minutes. So go ahead and submit your input, and I will be there also answering any of the input that you might have. Thank you again so much. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.